Palantir reported earnings earlier this week. Michael Burry proceeded to release one of his positions via 13F, close to $1 billion in total value via options for puts. He's expecting drastic downside. Now, I will say, since earnings, you are down, sitting near 184, 185, bouncing back in like 188, 189 on the day. But there's a lot of speculation of what's going on with Palantir's future. And it's also interesting as this comes out right after earnings. We're going to be breaking down in depth what's happening with Palantir's earnings, everything to expect, and then going in a little bit more to their products so you can understand what's on the commercial side, what's going on besides the government contracts and everything in between. We'll also go deep into the stock of understanding the technical side, what you should be looking for finding more upside, finding more downside, and where the opportunities are going to be lying there for you. So again, if you have any questions, make sure you leave them down below. I always recommend following us on Twitter as well to get all the updates as you see fit. TikTok, YouTube, Twitter, the best ways to get all of our content. As always, let's get to work. Now, before I go too far, I always want to say and get the ads out of the way. If you want to see what we're doing every single day, how we're trading, etc., the Discord link is down below, so make sure you tap in if you are interested. You get all of our trades, what's happening with futures, which is a massive part of the market, obviously, going into our scalps, going into our swing trades, going into our watch list, everything in between. It's all there for you. The link is down below. Check us out. Now, going into Palantir, I want to start more just as a whole so we can kind of understand what's really happening. Now, their earnings that they just reported were pretty solid. And I want to focus more on the actual revenue because, again, is Palantir overvalued? That's a quick question we can answer, okay? I know people, you come to this video like, well, it makes sense, they're overvalued. And I'm going to play both sides of the trade here, for instance, right? Your PE ratio is 440. That's insane. Your market cap is $445 billion. And you just did revenue of 1.2 million, basically. So even rounding up, being generous, they're bringing in roughly, $4.8, $4.5 billion a year. That's, again, being very generous. They're not actually bringing that in. And again, that would still be almost 100x valuation, right? Market cap versus, gross earnings on the year. So it's important to understand, what are you doing? Why is this holding up? Why is this an opportunity? Is it an opportunity? Is it overvalued? Where's it going, right? Now, what I want to highlight here on a name like Palantir is it's 110,000% a growth stock. What does that mean? We've seen this happen before, not just with Palantir, but with other equities, other names, etc. Okay. And when I'm saying it's a growth stock, you're not seeing a lot of growth stocks right now because we're not in a period to where companies can borrow a lot of money and take on crazy debt because interest rates are so high. But Palantir is doing really well. But as a growth stock, you had this period and it really wasn't getting this momentum way back here when you were sitting, below $40. But really when you were stuck, we all remember, from $8 to like $20 when this was, is it a meme? Is it going to ever run? Ended up working out, right? And I do think the AI, bull run of 2024 really stimulated this as well. But it's important to understand, the earnings now are justifying what's happening, okay? And what do I mean by that? So you were doing 500 million. You were basically stuck at this 500 million marker, as you can see here down below, for like a year, 2 years. And then you eventually broke 600 mil. Then it was like 600. And you slowly get out of 600. And then where you get the big breakout from $40, and you start breaking that threshold from 600 mil into 700. And, now we're trucking way higher, right? You start doing from 700 into 820, 880, 1 billion, and then now 1.18, almost 1.2. So you're seeing substantial growth. And again, it's going crazy. Now, is this justified? Is it overvalued? Yeah. But again, with what you're seeing with the move of AI, the move of semiconductors and how much money it's generating and how much money Palantir is now generating and how they're able to grow now that they're not just focusing on, obviously, the government contracts with the UK, the US, they're now focused on the business side, commercial side, right? That's what's really stimulating. And we'll go into that in a second. But again, where Palantir can go wrong, let's address that first. Where Palantir would start nosediving, getting the immediate short. And I think Michael Burry's idea of going short makes logical sense. Not on NVIDIA, I'm telling you, going short on NVIDIA, I don't see the vision there whatsoever. But on Palantir, yes. But the other side is it's what I always say. You don't have to really be the first person in the market. And I'm not here to pretend that I'm smarter than Michael Burry. He made a killing in 2008. But for me, I don't like to be the first person in a trade. I just don't. I think you can still capture a move. You don't have to time the top. You don't have to time the bottom. And it's something that I talk about so much here. So it's really important that we understand that ideology before we move further. But what's going to be the straw that breaks the camel's back, in my opinion, is when earnings slow down, when growth stalls out. But right now you're not seeing that because, again, 1.18 billion, 63% year over year growth above the expectations. That is really good. GAAP net income up 231% year over year. U.S. commercial, their business side, right? 121% year over year. Government up 52%. Again, that year over year from the commercial side is what's making them all those money. But again, you can see the difference here, what's really making sense and what's working out. And they're now discovering that new side of the business, which is growing rapidly. And I don't really think that's going to slow down right now. And again, until that slows down, I don't see Palantir getting really hit. Now, does that mean it won't have a pullback? No, that's not what I'm saying. Okay. You've seen multiple pullbacks into the 50-day moving average, and I would still kind of be targeting that right now into 177. But at least until we break the 50-day moving average, I don't know how we're really like looking for downside. You know what I mean? Or even the 200-day moving average is where you really start to look for downside. So we're not even there. But I still think you could really see some sort of pullback into like 150, 145, and it be a really decent opportunity with the scale of growth of what we're having. And another thing that I want to highlight out there with AI and semiconductors, et cetera, and Palantir's not a semiconductor. But NVIDIA is another interesting, and this is one of the names that Birdie's short on. NVIDIA just announced, and we talked about it, that they're expecting to make $500 billion in orders already confirmed over the next 6 quarters. That would almost double. That would over double their current revenue of what they're doing. 100% overall growth on the top equity in the stock market, right? Again, people like it's overvalued. I'm just saying, if they're bringing in over the course of a year and a half, $500 billion, I don't think they're overvalued. I'm just saying. And they're growing at crazy pace. So again, when I go back into Palantir, again, it's not the same as NVIDIA, but it's important to understand, like I said plenty of times, if AI is the gold rush, there's going to be a handful of companies that make it out like bandits, that destroy, they capitalize on the gold rush, they find the gold, etc. There's gonna be a lot of AI names that go bust. I agree. But again, Palantir is looking like one of those names based off of numbers. The money doesn't lie, right? And Palantir isn't in this, circle jerk of NVIDIA borrowing money from OpenAI and OpenAI borrowing money from AVGO to pay Intel and all this Palantir's not in that. They're just printing. So it's very important to understand what's taking place out there right now. Now, again, what I want to do is kind of do more of a fundamental viewpoint. So if people have questions, hopefully we can get some of those answered. And then we can also go and break down what's happening. Now, again, this is more of the earnings side, which, again, we just covered pretty largely. What I want to cover more is what's happening, why it beat. Heavy AIP demand across commercial plus large federal contracts, right? Federal contracts, IRS, State Department, et cetera, NATO allied events, specifically the UK, Europe, et cetera. We talked a lot about that as well. But again, this commercial side is, I don't think enough people are talking about that. And one of the things that I wasn't a fan of Palantir. I can be honest, I can be transparent, a huge fan when it was really cheap. But the one thing they had going for them was those government contracts, and they built that base very strong. And even coming into this year, remember the State Department was supposed to cut cost on spending, right? Pete Hegseth talks about it. I might be mispronouncing his name, but the Defense Department was talking about overall reducing spending. But Palantir increased how much they're actually selling to the State Department. So everyone was like, "Oh, Palantir's going to get hit." It didn't. So very important to understand that. Now, how we view Palantir, let's talk about it, okay? For someone building a trading playbook, here's how I see Palantir. The company's delivered solid results and raised guidance, which supports further upside. Again, growth. If you're a growth stock in AI and semiconductors, if you're making more money, if you're growing, your earnings from last quarter up almost 20%, you're doing what you need to do. That said, the bar is high. And again, what do we mean by this? This is what I'm saying when you're trading, and there's no point of really trading some of these earnings, is because you're seeing the breakout prior to earnings. And we talked about that in some of my later videos, right? My last Palantir video, expecting the move to 200, right? You're getting these big moves before you even get the fundamental side of it. So you're almost pricing earnings to perfection. And I think earnings did come out almost perfect for Palantir. And you still saw some downside movement on it, right? again, I think you're fine as of right now, especially from earnings. But again, that's the danger. And if what would happen if Palantir came out just at $1 billion? They missed, dude, Palantir would be dropping. It'd be sub 170, pushing the 160s, maybe lower, especially with some of the selling we saw on NASDAQ. So things to really consider, okay? And I'll go into AMD in a second as well. Palantir qualifies as a growth momentum AI story with strong metrics, but it can be better for moderate risk, defined risk, options trades, and I think option trades are where you trade Palantir. I think shares, you just don't have the opportunity right now. Rather than high leverage bet the farm trades, they get valuation and competition. Monitor next quarter's commercial bookings. Again, we talked a lot about that. Partnership announcement, especially with AI defense and the government. Margin expense ramp up, and those will likely drive up the next leg. Again, very important. Now, going into that AIP, AIP is the part of what is being sold to other companies, right? Not the government specifically, okay? And again, we've kind of wrote it out here. Think of AIP as Palantir's way of letting enterprises use ChatGPT style AI on their own data, and they get full control and compliance. So they're not kind of like hamstrung with what they can and can't ask it, right? It connects basically their private data, integrates large language models, it creates AI-driven agents and workflows, preserve data security. And they go and they work directly around this, with their Gotham, Foundry, and Apollo, all different sets of those as well. I don't want to go too far into that, but again, what you can look at there. Now, what's driving the growth? Again, that commercial revenue up to 121% year over year as of the most recent earnings, almost entirely AIP driven from one single area of the market, from one single area of the company, which again is huge, right? So companies are not only just paying for it, they're paying for boot camps, people to learn how to use the model, how to work around this specifically for each company. And again, this is going to drive in reoccurring revenue from these companies, just like they're doing with the government. Very important, right? It seems like they come in once a year and they're just setting it up and refining. Each new AI pilot often converts into a multi-million-dollar contract once integrated. It becomes Palantir's biggest growth engine, helping it pivot from mostly government contracts to work to broad enterprise adoption, healthcare, energy, automotive, logistics. Relationship to other Palantir products, Gotham, defense and intelligence, AIP adds an AI decision for military defense, which it's funny that we literally have a military leader say that he regularly talks to AI with decisions, which is kind of crazy. Foundry, commercial data, large language models, automation, to Foundry, workflows, Apollo, software development, infrastructure. AIP uses Apollo to deploy update security at scale. So you're seeing that Palantir is just basically there to make companies better, right? To improve, revise, make better over and over and over. So again, you're seeing the ways that Palantir is working. And obviously, like I always say, we talk about levels not lying here on the channel, but numbers tell the story. If someone's ever wondering, well, why is my stock going down over the long haul? I'm not saying on the 1 hour or the 2 hour. I'm saying on the daily, on the weekly. Okay. This is how stocks typically will look when they're making good money. Go to NVIDIA, right? This is the story. Very important to understand. Okay. When they're making good money, your stock's going to perform. Investors love companies that make good money. We know that more than anything. Important to understand. So the fundamentals, they check out. Now, again, going into Burry's trade, one thing that I'm going to tell people, and I said this in one of my videos, I think yesterday or the day before, is you need to understand, should Burry's trade concern you? Should it affect the way you're mentally looking at, Palantir or whatever stocks, NVIDIA, etc.? In my opinion, it should not. Now, first of all, you need to understand Michael Burry is a human. So he will make mistakes. He will have errors. It's also worth mentioning, he was heavily short on NVIDIA during most of this run up previously. Very important to know that. So he's just going short again, doubling down, which again seems like a human mistake sometimes, right? You also have to understand that when you put in the work to what you're doing and you're investing in stocks that you believe in, if you've done the due diligence, have confidence in what you're doing. Now, you're going to be wrong. I've been wrong. I'm going to be wrong. I'm going to make a video tomorrow and I'll probably be wrong on something in the video. Okay. That's reality. But I'm here to say, if you're ever going to make it trading, if you're ever going to make it make money investing in the market, you're going to have confidence in what you're buying, what you're investing in, and ultimately whatever your goals are. You have to have an immeasurable amount of confidence, because at any point you're going to get an influx of emotions. And again, it's funny. I started running again. I'm getting back in shape. I've been running a lot, but I've been tracking my heart rate, right? Specifically for recovery. But one thing I've noticed is that my most stressful times of the day, yes, are when I'm running, whatever, But besides that, or when I'm in trades, which is actually hilarious, but also kind of while my wife was looking at it, laughing at me. But that's literally what's going on. And it still is going to happen, even to someone like me, even to someone you're watching here on social media. So I think if you do your research, have your confidence, you should be fine. Again, obviously have a trade plan, stop loss, etc. But I still think Palantir's in a really good position. Now, everyone freaking out about you dipping this and that. You need to also realize, okay, let's just take a step back for 1 second. Let's go look at SPY. Over the past like 3 days, SPY, 2-3 days, SPY kind of had a gap down yesterday, dipped down. Saw some aggressive selling. You had a good buy back up on the day, but it's still worth mentioning you had inherent weakness. I want to show you a name like AMD. And AMD is having a better reaction, obviously, than Palantir. I will say that. But AMD, again, had earnings, and they were pretty solid. And this is just to go to show you what can happen out there, okay? So AMD reports earnings, and AMD is in this position to where they basically stayed at the $7 billion marker for God knows how long. And then eventually, recently, they have started making deals with OpenAI, ChatGPT, and other people, and they started shooting up like crazy. Well, just now, yesterday, which I think was one of their best earnings they've ever had, they reported $9.2 billion in revenue. It's literally a heaven sent for AMD. If you don't know, AMD's been stuck at $7 billion. Like, when I say stuck, I mean stuck. They could not get above $7 billion to save their life. 7.68, 7.4, 7.6, go back 6.8, 5.8. I mean, it's really been stuck even below that, but it's like getting in the double digits was going to be like hell. And you can just see they've been stuck here, not really doing anything. That's why when people are like betting on, I'm like, what are you betting on? Like, it has nothing. It's not breaking up yet, right? It's not making the money. Now it's making the money. So AMD's getting a good reaction. I looked at AMD's earnings. I said yesterday, I was like, I wouldn't be surprised if this bounces. It was really good earnings. But again, when you see these crazy gap ups and these crazy moves, like AMD over the past, October 3rd, it was a 170. It reached highs of 270, almost up $100 at highs in a matter of 20 days off of a deal, right? You're pricing earnings into perfection. So you have to understand the risk of what you're facing and what you're really up against and what you have to report to see a next leg up. That doesn't mean after earnings. That's why I always say, don't even trade the earnings, just wait after, see the report, and then invest based off of that. You'll probably have more success over time. So again, what I'm looking at, I think PLTR is fine. Where I would really get concerned is if you start breaking below the 50 MA, I'd be targeting down to 170. That's going to be a big support near 170, 171. But then ultimately after that, you have some support at 155, but I'd be looking closer to the 200 SMA if you get that dip. In my personal opinion, if you hold back over your previous all-time high right here at 189.5, I'm expecting this to start pushing back up. You want to see the NASDAQ and the S&P get relative strength as well. Because again, it's like if you go outside and it's raining, you're like, okay, well, it's going to stop raining in a few minutes for me because I'm going to have a picnic and it should just stop raining because I need to have this picnic. Well, no, if the market's getting hit 9 out of 10 times, most of your equities are going to get hit as well. So the NASDAQ's trending down, the S&P's trending down. It's going to be hard for Palantir to get a lot of love because there's not much buyers in the street. So important to know that, be watching it. But above 189.5, I think you're fine. If you hold below this, I'd be looking for downside to 185. Under 185, 184, you're looking for 177. The 50-day moving average, 176, big support down there. So again, what I'm looking at there. Now, I do want to go into one more thing before we wrap up the video. Now, this part of the video is sponsored by Outside the Box Capital on behalf of UPXI. So again, I'm going over this company just for you, giving you a little bit of headwinds of what's happened with them. We've talked about them previously on the channel as well. Do your own research as always. Now, UPXI is an interesting name. And when we look at some of the stuff that's happened over, the past year, you've seen companies stacking crypto for their treasury. We've seen names like GameStop doing it. We've seen tons of companies doing this right now, right? And so basically what they're doing with their excess cash, they've just been buying crypto. Now, again, a lot of these companies are going different routes. We've seen companies focus on meme coins. We've seen companies focus on Bitcoin. We've seen companies focus on Ethereum like BMNR, which is solely focused on that. Now, UPXI, what they've been doing is they've been building up Solana. Now, I will say, if you've talked to me at all, Solana is my literal top crypto. I just like it. It's the one I think has the most potential as far as getting crazy upside. Now, again, we had that crazy run back, last year, 2024. And again, we kind of just been trending up here between basically 200 and like 140. Well, now during this period, UPXI has been adding an incredible amount, around $450 million worth of Solana total. That's where they're at about a month ago. So it's going to be counting up as you go into their next earnings. We'll get more information about that. Now, during that time when Solana obviously went berserk. Well, UPXI had a crazy run from around the summer from $2, $3, all the way into like $9. You did back down, we went back up. Again, as Solana was going and ripping, you were seeing the benefits, obviously. You can even go back as well back there. So it was a pretty crazy, wild trend. And now you're getting back down to the lows down here. Now, I'm not telling you to YOLO. I'm not telling you to go all in. Do your own research as always. But again, you're getting back to some of these levels where we started seeing buyers get aggressive. The other thing to understand is John Najarian. Again, you've seen him on CNBC. He got with the rat tail. Again, don't judge a man by his rat tail. Pretty big on options though. Anyways, he is one of the advisors for the company as well, specifically around UPXI and what they're doing with Solana. Very interesting to see. Keep him on your watch list at the very least. One of the more interesting cheap stocks out there. Now, again, going into the rest of the market, I still think PLTR is in this crazy spot. It's definitely, you're going to see, I think, a lot of volatility, but what you're really looking for is above 189.5 for longs. Below that, I think you got to tread carefully. Below the 50 SMA, I think you do lean towards the bearish side. I do believe dips would be a buying opportunity, my personal opinion, with how they're reporting revenue and how the growth is stable out there right now. The big question is really more towards the NASDAQ and the stock market. Can it hold up? And can we get continuation into the end of the year? See you in the next video.